What if the reason you're not where you want to be isn't bad luck or lack of opportunity? What if it's you? Not the version of you that dreams big, not the version that sets goals at 2 a.m. and feels unstoppable, but the version that quietly, slowly pulls you back. The one that says, "I'll start tomorrow." The one that hesitates right when things start getting real. The one that almost succeeds and then somehow stops. And the worst part? You don't even realize it's happening. Because it doesn't feel like sabotage. It feels like comfort. It feels like logic. It feels like being realistic. But deep down, something feels off. You've had those moments, right? When you're so close to changing your life and then suddenly you lose momentum. You tell yourself you're tired. You tell yourself it's not the right time. You tell yourself you'll do it later. And later never comes. Be honest. Does this feel familiar? Because if it does, you're not alone. But here's the part nobody tells you. You're not fighting the world. You're not fighting your circumstances. You're fighting yourself. And until you understand that, nothing changes. But this is where things start to shift, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. There are two versions of you living in the same mind. One wants growth, the other wants safety. One wants change, the other wants comfort. And every single day, they're at war. But here's the twist. The version that's losing your life is the one that feels the most natural. Think about that for a second. The habits that are ruining your progress feel normal. Scrolling instead of working feels easy. Avoiding discomfort feels smart. Delaying action feels safe. But safe is exactly what's keeping you stuck. And that's when it hits you. Maybe the problem isn't that you don't know what to do. Maybe the problem is you don't trust yourself enough to actually do it. Now here's where it gets real. Because self-sabotage doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It sounds like, "I'll just rest today. I'll start when I feel ready. I don't want to mess this up." And just like that, another day passes. Another opportunity fades. Another version of your life slips away. So why does this keep happening? Why do you keep getting in your own way even when you know better? Why do you sabotage the very things you say you want? Hold that question for a second, because the answer isn't what you think. It's not laziness. It's not lack of motivation. It's something deeper. And once you understand it, everything changes. But first, you have to face something uncomfortable. The version of you that's holding you back is trying to protect you. Yeah, that sounds backwards. But think about it. Every time you avoid something hard, your brain thinks it's helping. Every time you stay in your comfort zone, your brain thinks it's keeping you safe. Because your mind isn't designed for success. It's designed for survival. And success? Success feels risky. It feels uncertain. It feels uncomfortable, which means your brain sees it as a threat. So what does it do? It pulls you back. It creates doubt. It creates fear. It creates hesitation. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is doing its job. And that's when you realize something powerful. You've been playing the wrong game. You've been trying to push forward without understanding what's pulling you back. And that's why it feels so hard. Because you're not just building discipline, you're rewiring your identity. But wait till you hear this. The biggest lie you've been told is this: that you need more motivation. You don't. Motivation is temporary. It comes and goes. And if your life depends on it, you'll always fall back. So what do the people who actually succeed do differently?
What do they understand that you don't yet? They don't rely on motivation. They outgrow the version of themselves that needs it. And that's where everything begins to change. Because the moment you realize that your biggest obstacle isn't the world, it's the version of you that's afraid to grow, you stop waiting. You stop hesitating. You stop negotiating with your excuses. But let's be honest, that's easier said than done, right? Because part of you is still resisting this. Part of you is still saying, yeah, but my situation is different. And maybe it is, but the pattern? The pattern is the same. Fear, to delay, to regret, to repeat. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, this is the last time I'll procrastinate? And then it happens again. Not because you don't care, but because the version of you in control hasn't changed yet. So here's the real question. Which version of you is running your life right now? The one that wants growth or the one that wants comfort? Don't overthink it. You already know the answer. And that answer? That's your starting point. Because once you see the truth, you can't pretend anymore. And this next part changes everything.
So now you see it. It's not just bad habits. It's not just procrastination. It's a pattern, a loop you've been stuck in for longer than you'd like to admit. You decide to change. You feel motivated. You start strong. And then something shifts. You slow down. You hesitate. You disappear from your own plan. Not all at once, just enough to lose momentum. And momentum, once it's gone, is hard to get back. But here's where it gets real. Self-sabotage isn't random. It follows a very specific trigger. And once you see this, you start catching it in real time. It usually happens right before growth, right before a breakthrough, right when things start getting uncomfortable. That's when your brain steps in and says, let's not do this. And it sounds reasonable. Take a break. You've done enough. This might not even work. But underneath all of that is fear. Not fear of failure, that's what you've been told, but the real fear is success. Yeah, read that again. You're not just afraid of failing, you're afraid of becoming someone new. Because becoming someone new means letting go of who you've been, and that feels like losing control. Think about it. If you actually became disciplined, your life would change, your routines would change, your circle might change, your identity would change, and your brain? It hates uncertainty. Even if your current life is frustrating, it's familiar, and familiar feels safe. So what does your mind do? It pulls you back to what it knows, even if what it knows is keeping you stuck. Is this you or just me? Because this is the part most people never admit. They say they want change, but they're not ready for what change requires. And that's when it hits you. Self-sabotage isn't about destroying your life. It's about protecting your identity. The version of you that exists right now will fight to survive, even if it means holding you back. So if you really want to change, you don't just need better habits, you need a new identity. But here's the problem. Most people try to act like their future self while still thinking like their past self. And that creates friction. You wake up motivated, but your mind is still wired for comfort. You make a plan, but your identity doesn't believe it's real. So what happens? You fall back. Again. But this is where things start to shift. Because instead of asking, how do I stay consistent? You start asking, who do I need to become?
That question changes everything, because consistency isn't something you force. It's something that naturally happens when your identity aligns with your actions. Let me explain. A disciplined person doesn't wake up every day fighting themselves. They just do what they do. It's normal to them. It's part of who they are. But for you right now, discipline feels like effort. It feels heavy. It feels unnatural. And that's the clue. You're not struggling because you're incapable. You're struggling because your identity hasn't caught up yet. Now here's the part nobody tells you. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your identity. So if your identity says, I'm inconsistent, I always quit, I'm not that type of person, then guess what? Your actions will follow every single time. So the real battle isn't out there. It's internal. It's subtle. It's constant. And it's happening whether you notice it or not. But here's where it gets interesting. Because once you understand this, you stop taking your failures personally. You stop saying, what's wrong with me? And you start asking, what part of me is still running the show? That shift alone changes how you see everything. But don't get comfortable yet, because this next part is where most people mess up. They become aware of the problem, but they don't change the system. They rely on willpower. They try harder. They push themselves. And for a few days, it works. Until it doesn't. Because willpower is limited. It runs out. And when it does, you go right back to your default, your old patterns, your old habits, your old identity. So the question becomes, if willpower isn't the answer, then what is? Why do some people break free, while others stay stuck in the same cycle for years? Don't rush this. Sit with that question, because the answer is simpler than you think, but harder than you expect. And once you understand it, you stop fighting yourself and start working with your mind instead of against it. And that's when everything changes.
So here's the shift, the one that most people never make. You stop trying to win the day and start designing it. That sounds small, but it changes everything. Because right now, you're relying on decisions, moment-to-moment choices. Should I work or scroll? Should I go to the gym or skip today? Should I start now or later? And every one of those decisions is a chance to lose. Because when your mind is tired, it will choose what's easy every time. So instead of asking yourself to be stronger, you remove the need to decide. You build systems, simple ones, clear ones, non-negotiable ones. Not because you're perfect, but because you're predictable. And this is where it gets powerful. Because the version of you that sabotages your life needs freedom to operate. It needs gaps. It needs uncertainty. It needs those little moments where you can say, I'll do it later. So you close those gaps. You make the path obvious. You make the alternative harder. Not through force, but through design. For example, if your phone is the problem, you don't rely on discipline, you remove it. Different room, different time, different environment. If your mornings fall apart, you don't try harder. You simplify. Wake up, do one thing. Start small. No thinking, just action. Because thinking is where sabotage begins. Now wait till you hear this. The goal isn't to become perfect. It's to become consistent enough that your identity starts to shift. Because every time you follow through, even in a small way, you send a signal to your brain. This is who I am now.
and your brain listens, slowly but surely. And this is where something interesting happens. You stop needing motivation, not because you don't feel it, but because you don't depend on it. You've built a system that works even when you don't feel like it. And that's when the real confidence starts to build. Not the loud kind, not the "I can do anything" kind. The quiet kind. The kind that says, "I trust myself." And that trust? That's everything. Because self-sabotage thrives in doubt. When you don't trust yourself, you hesitate. When you hesitate, you delay. When you delay, you reinforce the old identity. But when you trust yourself, you move, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's boring. Now here's a question. Which version of you shows up when things get hard? The one who follows through, or the one who negotiates? Think about that, because that moment, that exact moment, is where your future is decided. Not in big wins, not in huge breakthroughs, in small, quiet choices, over and over again. And this is where it all starts to come together. You realize you don't need a complete life overhaul. You need fewer broken promises to yourself. That's it. Because every time you break a promise, you weaken your identity. And every time you keep one, you strengthen it. Simple. Not easy, but simple. Now here's the part that changes everything. You stop focusing on outcomes and start focusing on evidence. Evidence that you're becoming the person you said you would be. Did you show up today? That's evidence. Did you follow through, even a little? That's evidence. Did you choose discomfort over ease? That's evidence. And over time, that evidence builds, stack by stack, day by day, until one day, you look at yourself and realize you're not the same person anymore. Not because of one big moment, but because of hundreds of small ones. And that's when it hits you. You were never stuck. You were just repeating a pattern. And now, you've broken it. But here's where it gets real. Because the moment you start improving, a new level of resistance shows up. Different thoughts, different doubts, different fears. Because growth doesn't eliminate resistance, it upgrades it. So the question is, what do you do when it comes back? When the old voice returns, when the urge to delay creeps in, when you feel like slipping again? This next part is the difference between people who change temporarily and people who change permanently.
So here you are. You've seen the pattern. You've started to change it. You've felt what it's like to actually follow through. And for the first time in a long time, you feel a little in control. But then, out of nowhere, it comes back. That voice, that hesitation, that quiet pull toward comfort. And it catches you off guard, because you thought you were past this. You thought you had it figured out. But this is where most people slip, not at the beginning, but right here, when they start believing, "I've fixed it." Because self-sabotage doesn't disappear. It adapts. It gets smarter, more subtle. It stops sounding like doubt and starts sounding like logic. You've been working hard. Take it easy today. You deserve a break. Missing one day won't matter. And technically, that's true. One day won't matter. But one day turns into 2, then 3. And before you even notice, you're back in the same cycle. So what's the move? How do you stop this from happening again? You don't fight it. You expect it. That's the difference. You stop being surprised by resistance and start preparing for it. Because resistance isn't a sign you're failing. It's a sign you're growing. And that changes how you respond. Instead of saying, "Why is this happening again?" you say, "Of course this is happening." And then you move anyway. Now here's the shift that locks everything in. You stop identifying with your thoughts. Just because you think something doesn't make it true. Just because you feel something doesn't mean you have to act on it. That voice in your head, it's not you. It's a pattern, a script that's been running for years, and now you're rewriting it. But rewriting takes repetition, consistency, awareness, and patience, because there will be days when you don't feel like the new version of yourself, days when the old habits feel stronger, days when it would be so easy to go back. And in those moments, you don't rely on feelings. You rely on decisions, simple ones, clear ones, non-negotiable ones. You show up, not perfectly, but consistently. And over time, something incredible happens. The voice that used to stop you gets quieter. The resistance that used to control you loses its grip, and the version of you that once felt impossible becomes normal. That's when you realize this was never about motivation. It was never about waiting for the right moment. It was about becoming someone who moves, regardless of how they feel. Now let me ask you something. If you kept going like this, if you stayed consistent, if you stopped negotiating with your excuses, where would you be in 6 months? A completely different place, right? Now flip that. If you go back to your old patterns, if you keep delaying, if you keep choosing comfort, where will you be? Same place, same frustration, same thoughts. So the real choice isn't complicated. It's uncomfortable. And that's why most people avoid it. But you've made it this far. You've seen the truth. You know what's been holding you back. So now, it comes down to one thing. Who are you going to be? The version that keeps repeating the cycle, or the version that breaks it? Not tomorrow, not next week, now. Because change doesn't happen later. It happens in the moment you decide, I'm not going back. And you don't need a perfect plan. You don't need perfect conditions. You just need one decision that you actually follow through on. Today, right now, even if it's small, especially if it's small, because small actions build real identity, and real identity changes everything. If this makes sense, say something. Not for anyone else, just to acknowledge it to yourself, because the moment you become aware, you have a choice. And most people ignore that moment. They feel it, and then scroll. They understand it, and then delay. Don't do that this time. This time, do something different, because you're closer than you think, closer to control, closer to clarity, closer to becoming the person you keep imagining, but only if you stop getting in your own way. So here's the one thing to take with you. You don't need to defeat the world. You just need to stop defeating yourself. And if this hit home, don't just move on like nothing happened. Stay with it, subscribe, and start choosing a version of your life that actually moves forward.